Throughout the history of computing, many operating systems have come and gone, but only a select few have made their mark in history. Today we are here to touch upon these select few: Windows, Mac OS X, Android, and iOS. In this video, we will be giving a brief overview of the history, pros and cons, as well as some of the common uses of each operating system.
From humble beginnings in 1985, the Windows family has boomed into a household tech name, with the operating system line now being present on more than 80% of the world's computers. It is now the most successful operating system lineup in the world. Windows initially started out as a mere GUI extension, or GUI, of the already existing operating system MS-DOS, but gradually abandoned its DOS roots and transformed into its own OS with the introduction of its first major operating system, Windows 95. Along with this came its first web browser, Internet Explorer. In 2001, Windows XP arrived on the scene. With a fresh new look and new features, Windows XP 64 was the first 64-bit operating system, which allowed it to support over 4 GB of RAM that 32-bit systems were limited to. XP's successor Vista was a critical failure. To address its forecomer's shortcomings, 7 opted to improve things such as excessive resource consumption and fixed issues like random slowdowns that Vista was prone to. Windows 7 also had an interesting look with its arrow feature, the ability to give window borders a new transparent design. Today we are currently on Windows 10. It boasts a sleek new UI and improves upon some of the features of the previous entries. It also has interesting features like voice recognition and a new web browser, Microsoft Edge. What are some of the pros of Windows? Windows has great software support. Nearly all PC programs support the operating system. Windows has expansive hardware support as well, allowing for unique and powerful custom builds, a great choice for gamers. Windows is also quite affordable and supports a great deal of work-related software such as PowerPoint and Excel, making it a fine business addition. Windows also has expansive third-party community support due to its wide user base. Examples include the Windows subreddit. Windows generally also has low requirements, with Windows 10 requiring only 2 GB of RAM, a 1 GHz processor, and 16 GB of hard drive space. What are some of the disadvantages of Windows? Windows is far more unstable than its Unix-based cousins. Instabilities can include slow loading time, lack of program responsiveness, and error messages, sometimes requiring a full reboot. Because it is so widely used, the majority of viruses and malware also tend to be directed at Windows. Windows frequently requires patches and updates to address flaws, and some updates have caused problems ranging from driver malfunctions to deleted files.
Mac operating system was designed and developed by Apple to run on their Macintosh line of computers. Starting on March 24, 2001, Apple released its first Mac OS X operating system and released 14 more after. Each operating system was designed to help users operate their computer with as little problems as they could. The first version of their Mac OS X operating system was called Cheetah. It had a Unix base and included apps such as email, address book, and text edit. Their next biggest release was Leopard. In 2007, it came with Boot Camp, which allows Apple users to switch back and forth from a Windows operating system if they wanted to, and Time Machine that allows users to restore lost data. This update also came with a redesigned look. In the next version, Apple rewrote their applications in a 64-bit code, allowing for multi-core processors and freed about 7 GB worth of space. This was a pretty significant amount. In 2014, Apple released Yosemite. With another redesign, the display looks more like what a user would see today. Yosemite introduced Handoff, an application that gave users the skill of starting a task on one device and ending on another, as well as allowing users to receive calls and text messages, along with the ability to reply to them on their computer. Each operating system has its pros and cons, varying from person to person. One advantage of Mac OS X is the little maintenance required from the user. Apple has a more secure operating system using a Unix base. This makes it more complex than Windows, which might have been considered a disadvantage, but Apple does an exceptional job at making their operating system user-friendly. Two of the common disadvantages with Mac OS X is it's often too expensive. and not a good operating system for gamers because of the lack of hardware and software in terms of gaming. Overall, Mac OS X is a reliable and excellent choice of an operating system. Because of its ability to switch from its default operating system to Windows, Mac OS X appeals to a broad audience. In addition to this, its seamless support for other Apple products, such as the iPhone, makes it a great choice for current Apple consumers.
The Android OS made its appearance around 10 years ago since the first Android phone made its way to the market. When Google made Android an open source OS, it became very popular among third-party manufacturers. This led to the boom in demand of this new semi-mobile OS. Once Android shifted gears towards the OS inside smartphones, things really started to take off. Android started to release new versions of the OS, but they always followed the theme of having a candy or dessert name. The first official public code name for the OS 1.5 was called Cupcake. Cupcake, released in 2009, added the ability to upload videos to YouTube or being able to rotate the screen. Android Ice Cream Sandwich included a favorites tray on the home screen and facial recognition software. Another important release was Android O, or Android Oreo. This added a ton of visual changes to the settings menu and program interface. The last OS to be released was Android Pie. This update took away Android's traditional navigation buttons but added features to extend battery life. Some of the advantages of the Android OS are an open source OS. This brings a wide range of developer-built apps, and since the source code is readily available to the public, it allows anyone to make modifications to suit their needs. This is a feature that Apple does not have. There is also a lot of diversity in the hardware for this OS. Android OS can be found on all types of devices such as Samsung, LG, HTC, Sony, and Motorola. Some of Android's disadvantages are that since Android is a very open OS, that means that anyone can add to the store. This floods the Google Play Store with many different applications, and navigating the Play Store requires safe practices. Users have to be careful what they download. Android devices are also more prone to malware and viruses when accessing these free applications. Android also does not distribute their updates at the same time for each phone, so this can lead to app compatibility issues, so phones can be running on vastly different versions of the OS. Android will continue to be a leading mobile OS worldwide. Google is very committed to updating and developing this operating system.
iOS is Apple's mobile operating system. The iPhone, iPod, and iPad use this operating system. When the iPhone was introduced, it opened a whole new world for operating systems. iOS was the first to unify the iPod, phone, camera, and internet into one device. The iOS was derived from the same Unix code as Mac OS. Many features from the first OS is still in use today. For example, the Springboard, which is the display of apps. Every summer, Apple revamps their operating system to please the demand of the consumer. Apple is known for their constant additions to their operating system. iOS 4 introduced FaceTime, which revolutionized video calling. iOS 7 provided a simpler design and also displayed the first photo app. The iOS 10 improved the lock screen and refreshed the looks of certain apps. And the iOS 11 was the largest update Apple has released, which brought hundreds of new features, including the update of the multitasking feature. Most smartphones provide the same general technology, so why is Apple the standout product? Apple is considered the most user-friendly smartphone. This is why so many consumers choose Apple products. Apple provides a clean and clear layout and is fairly easy to navigate through. Another important feature that iOS provides is that the App Store tends to get the mainstream apps before its competitor. An example is that Apple received Instagram 2 years before Android did. Unfortunately, iOS does bring some disadvantages in company to its advantages. Unlike other smartphones, the iPhone does not support SD cards, and as such, iOS offers no SD card functionality. Also, the App Store is a closed source. This means that you can only download the apps that Apple allows. Although there are some workarounds, they tend to be a bit complicated.